Oh, usually you have 20, now you had 40, you're saying.
Oh, like when we looked at the signups last
Oh.
week versus, today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, well, welcome everyone to the Startup Grind Boston virtual fireside chat event. And yeah, we're really excited to have all of you here. So we host about 2 events every month, virtually from our Boston chapter, and then there's 500 other chapters around the world as well. It started out in Silicon Valley about 10 or 11 years ago, and now there's chapters across the world, across Asia, Africa, Europe. Plenty of chapters in the U.S. and both cities and university chapters there as well. And it's been we were always traditionally doing in-person events, and looking forward to getting back to seeing everybody in person there. But we're also excited that we're able to bring in speakers and attendees from wherever you guys are located and continue with these virtual events here. So, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out our resources at startupgrind.com/Boston. We have a few other events coming up, throughout February into the Startup Grind Global Conference at the end of February. And we also have a list of other partners and resources, that can help any of your startups in a variety of needs, from like coaching to development and marketing and PR. We try to partner with people that can really add value to our startup community. And we also have two sponsors. One is Brex, which is a first corporate credit card for startups, and also now they have online banking solutions as well. And our other partner is ShipQuid, which is offering basically solutions for people to figure out who their ideal customer persona is and manage that and streamline it across your sales team. A couple questions came in. The conference does have I think it has both ticketed and free solutions there as well. There's a link to the global ticketing site on our website, and there's different packages in there, where some of it's just attending, some of it's exhibiting your startup, some of it's more events involved with like more networking events and things like that. And it's definitely open to, our events are definitely open to people outside of Boston as well. So John, great to have you on here too. And with that, I think, we have a really exciting topic and exciting speaker here today. So excited to have Victoria come up, give a quick introduction before we dive into the chat here. And basically, we're going to keep it conversational, go through a fireside chat format. Anytime you guys have questions as well, feel free to submit them through the chat box, and then we can also open it up to more interactive Q&A at the end as well. So with that, Victoria, we'd love to have you just give a quick introduction to yourself and to into Startup Station.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Yevgeny, and welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be here. I actually have parents in Boston, so I go to Boston quite often, but I live right now in New York City. And the Startup Station is 7 years old. The purpose of it is to help entrepreneurs raise funding. And we help startups at the early stage, anywhere from pre-seed to Series B, to put together credible financials and valuations so that when they talk to investors, they're able to present their business case credibly from the financial point of view. So to that end, we have a lot of free resources, such as, every week I post a financial modeling tip from the Startup Station, where I show how to model one scenario from start to finish. We have paid classes where we teach entrepreneurs with no finance experience the basics of accounting, financial modeling, valuation, and startup finance. And we now have 2 programs to give entrepreneurs access to both private and public funding. One is the investor matching program with Astra Global. It's a company out of Switzerland with access to more than 5,000 investors in US and Europe. So this is for seed and Series A startups. And then there is access to public funding in Europe as well. And this is an opportunity for non-EU based startups in healthcare at this time to apply for European public funding without having to relocate. And then I'll give you guys info about these programs, I guess, towards the end of the chat, if you're interested to learn more. The pilot for the European grants, so we don't submit applications for that program right now. We're gonna, we have submissions already. We're gonna run a pilot with 3 companies, but then we're gonna open up that program as well. The investor matching is gonna start in about 2 months for the second round. And yeah, so that's what I do. And also I teach recently at the Bank of America Institute of Women's Entrepreneurship at Cornell. And this is a program funded by Bank of America for women entrepreneurs, graduated more than 10,000 entrepreneurs in the past, I think, 2 years. So it's pretty exciting for me to be a part of that endeavor as well and help women succeed.
Yeah, and it's really exciting, all the resources you're providing, through Startup Station and, all the exciting programs you're connected with as well. So how did you, taking a step back, how did you get into into helping startups, and what was the pathway from either startups of your own or the financial companies you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, it wasn't definitely a straight path. I didn't definitely wake up one day and say, hey, I'm gonna create a Startup Station. So I have a computer science background. At 18, I thought I was gonna be a programmer. At about 20, I decided I'm definitely not gonna be a programmer, but it was a little bit late to change my major, so I just graduated from the computer science degree and then did IT consulting. And then I working in financial services. So I got an idea that I'm going to really enjoy working in finance instead of being on the technology side for finance, working in finance directly. So I got my MBA and I went to Wall Street. And I did not like that either. The job itself, wasn't as exciting as the sound of it, and the hours were grueling, and it didn't justify for me. If I wasn't really enjoying the work, I didn't want to spend all my life, basically, or most of my waking hours doing something I didn't love. And so I quit my job and I decided to pursue entrepreneurship. Because I have acting background, I wanted to try my hand in entertainment. So I set up a film company. That was my first venture. And of course, that was 10 years ago. I made all the mistakes that, first time entrepreneurs make. I didn't vet the team. I didn't properly validate the product market fit. I tried to raise $165 million as my first raise for the slate of films. Obviously, that didn't go so well. I raised nothing. But I learned a lot of very valuable lessons. And actually now, 10 years later, I'm back to film financing, but this time I'm only financing one film. So we'll see what happens with that. And this film is actually based on my idea, which is very exciting. But yeah, so after that venture didn't work out, I kind of fell into advising one startup, which was a mobile design and development company. And I realized that startups had the same problem as film creatives, where, they were brilliant in their area of expertise, where it was a film or it was a technology solution, but they had very little business acumen or financial acumen, right? So they didn't know necessarily how to bring the product to market. And so I helped my first company to go from pre-revenue to revenue. That was at the time when not every company was building mobile solutions. There was still, something new. And that gave birth to the Startup Station. And, over time, started as consulting. We expanded to educational resources, and then, we built up more free resources. And then now we have funding programs available. And so it just grew through partnerships and through adding different content to, where we are today, where I've taught, over 1,000 entrepreneurs my curriculum, and I've helped over 150 companies worldwide, and now we're helping companies get funding as well through different programs. So that's basically, my journey,
And so,
basically spurred by me not being happy with what I was doing and looking for a place for fulfillment.
no, and that's yeah, that's how it all gets started. And it sounds like you found something now that is really fulfilling and also helps a lot of people. So what's the, there's obviously a lot of challenges as an early stage entrepreneur or the companies you're working with. Like, what's the most common, what are the most common challenges that companies are coming to you for to get advice and help on, on their pathway?
Well, because I have a very specific area of focus, which is financials. People come to me because they're typically pre-revenue and they need to present something to investors in terms of P&L, and they don't really know how to start or how to properly translate their business plan into a financial plan. And a financial plan at that stage is very much the strategy of the startup, because it has to come from their assumptions. It has to come from understanding of how the company is going to grow, understanding of their go-to-market strategy. And so when I work with startups, we actually work on their strategy first before building the quantitative representation of it, which is a financial model. So everybody has, pretty much the same problem. Hey, I need to raise money. How much is my company worth? How can I make my venture appear attractive to investors? And we go through the process, through the framework that I've developed of value in early stage ventures. And we always arrive at a solution which, represents their business credibly, allows them to understand their business on a much deeper level, have a baseline for how they're going to execute and how they're going to achieve their goals, and also have a framework within which they can talk to investors, because the valuation that comes out of that financial model is and that's something that we're going to talk about it today, right, is like a floor, right? So that if you can justify your assumptions, you should at least be able to get that, or within that, and if you decide to give a discount. But definitely gives founders leverage and more confidence when they talk to investors, and that helps them accelerate the funding process, because investors have more confidence that the founders knows what they're doing, that they're disciplined, that there is a pathway to profitability, that the goals that that need to be reached are clear, and also the way how those goals are going to be reached is clear, and how the success is going to be measured.
And yeah, I think that's a really good segue into the valuation topic. And I know it gets a lot easier along the way as there's like high revenue numbers and more statistics to come up with your valuation. But how do you work with, or what are you recommending to the earlier stage companies that are trying to figure out, either pre-revenue or early revenue companies, how they go about figuring out what their company is actually worth and what they should be asking from investors?
So what I use, there's actually a whole valuation class that's available on the Startup Station platform, where I teach different methods of valuing startups. The one model that I recommend, which you guys can Google, is called the venture capital method. And so there are generally, two ways to value early stage startup. One of them is a qualitative, one of them is a quantitative. The qualitative is more for companies that have no idea, right? I mean, this is a scorecard methodology where different angel investors have different factors that they look at, and you can assign a value to a factor and weigh that factor in a certain way and come up with the value for your company. The problem with that approach, of course, it's easy, right? You don't need to learn finance. You don't need to worry about accounting or things that you may not understand. But the problem with this approach that it's not specific enough to the company's business model. Also, each factor has a range, so you're limited to whatever the maximum valuation for that scorecard is. And then you don't decide what the value of that factor is, an investor does. And so you don't really have a lot of say in terms of what your company is worth. But, there are a couple of scorecards that I think are really good. One of them is Dave Berkowitz scorecard, and another one is Bill Payne. And especially Bill Payne is very detailed, and I actually use it as a good guide for when you review a pitch deck or prepare a pitch deck to make sure that you address all of the items on a scorecard so that your pitch deck is complete. And I guess you could see what the company is worth from the scorecard perspective, but that's not my favorite way of valuing startups. I focus on translating the company strategy into a financial plan, because just like you need a business plan, you need a quantitative representation of it, which is a financial plan. It allows you to see the financial feasibility of your venture, and then using this venture capital method to see what the value of that plan is right now, given all of the information that we have at the moment, right? This is our best guess, best estimate for what the company is. And then, the negotiation starts. And of course, there is also the forces of supply and demand. And so this is basically kind of this valuation in your financial model is one of your tools to negotiate for the better deal for yourself. If you don't have it, you can't even justify why you would want a different valuation. If you have it, you can say, hey, this is our plan, this is our growth strategy, this is how much money we need to achieve our goals, etc. If you don't have that, then you basically have to take whatever deal is presented to you. But valuation is just a number, and it's actually not the most important thing to negotiate in a term sheet, right? And the more important thing to negotiate is control. And that I don't know if we want to move to the next topic, but 4 out of 5 founders lose control of their company, sometimes because they don't do a good job, and sometimes because they get pushed out. And there are certain things you can do even from the beginning to kind of mitigate and minimize the chance of that happening.
Sure. Yeah, what are have some other follow-ups from there, but yeah, to start, like, what are some of those techniques that that you can recommend, like when you're negotiating term sheets to retain control in your business?
Sure. So one thing, to understand first is that the contract always makes it clear what the perceived risks are, right? And so if an investor tells you that they're your partner, but then all the clauses in the contract are kind of structured in a way where the investor wants to take control and it doesn't really trust you, then they're not your true partner. And just like it's important for investors to find good investments, right? It's equally important for founders to find good financial partners, because this is a 10-year plus, especially the early stage of relationship. And people need to be aligned in terms of their goals and incentives in order for the venture to be a success. And so the first thing to think about is the structure of the board, right? So for example, the typical structure of the board when you have the board of directors is that the founders will get a board seat, right? But as you go through rounds, big investors or important investors may also require a board seat. And there could also be some board seats that belong to independent members. Okay, so if you have 2 seats, if you add 2 more seats, you have equal control of the board. The second you add a 5th seat to your board, you lose control of your board, right? And then you need to really be on the same page with the board members in order for the board to pass the decisions that don't conflict with your interests, right? So the typical structure for an early stage startup could be 2-to-1, where it's 2 founders, 2 investors, and 1 independent board members, and it's going to grow as you go through more rounds. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with losing control of your board. This is natural as you go through more rounds. It is important, however, to put in good governance guidelines so that you are not creating a board that's going to be, your enemy, but in fact, you're creating a board that's your ally who you can come to for help, etc. Right? And so we're going to talk about it a little bit later. I just want to cover some of the clauses that you need to watch out for, which may result in your control. So one of them is voting rights. So voting rights, right? So you need to decide, the board is going to vote on a lot of important decisions, right? Mergers, acquisitions, strategic expansions, hiring of key executives, obviously exits, going public. And so you need to know how many votes are required to make certain decisions. Sometimes it could be a simple majority, which is 51%. Sometimes it can be super majority, which is 67%. This is, you decide. That you may ask for an advice from your lawyer in terms of, which decisions should be heavier weighted versus lighter weighted, but that's something that should be decided in advance, and that's going to guide the decision process. Also, it's important how many voting rights some investors have. For example, some investors may invest, not a lot of money, but they may ask for special voting rights. So each share will have, triple or, quadruple voting rights than what normally would, one share, one voting right, right? So that's something that you need to be careful about, because voting rights equal to power, right? Another thing to watch out for, and remember, right, that the board can fire you. So that's how founders lose control of their company, is that the board can make a decision to let you go. Another important thing to think about is liquidation preference. This is basically some clauses that put in that specify how much money investor will get if you have a liquidation event, either going public or an acquisition. And I will tell you, or sometimes there's actually, more clauses on that. And so I will tell you a true story how a founder came to me with a term sheet. And the worrying thing about this example is that the term sheet has been recommended by a lawyer, and the lawyer told that founder that this is a standard, that everybody signs term sheets like that. And the terms were as following. So for the investment, so the investor puts in money, and then the founder begins, generating money. The second, the company begins generating cash flow, okay? It will give away 70% of that cash flow until an investor gets his investment back, okay? At which point it will start giving away 50% of cash flow until they will get their required return, and then there will be some annuity after that. And, obviously this is an onerous term sheet, okay? It's great for investors, right. But it's absolutely horrible for founders, because the second that the company begins making money and can invest in growth, it gives all of that money away, so it can't really grow. And also it will be impossible for that company to raise money from other investors, because anybody who looks at that commitment will not want to get engaged, right? Because they're investing into the future, not at the where the company is at the moment. And so make sure that you never sign as a startup anything that requires you to, submit to such an onerous, conditions or revenue share, because signing a term sheet like this will actually ensure that your company will fail, right? I mean, there's just like no way with these terms that the company can really succeed, given that you're starting at the very beginning where you don't have a lot of revenues. Another thing that you can watch out for is participating preferred stock, right? So this is like investors double dipping, where they will be able to get, dividends, and also they will be able to get on top of that a proportion of the proceeds of the company exits, and also cumulative dividends. Cumulative dividends is something that will be required to be paid to investors every year, regardless of any liquidation event. So it's very similar to an interest on debt, right? That's actually why I don't like convertible debt as an instrument, because it has a cash flow obligation. And for companies at the very young stage, it's not good to have any cash flow obligations, because they may or may not be in a position to meet them. And it creates extra pressure on a company when really all they should be focusing on is growth. So these are the terms to watch out for. And the last one is I want to mention is warrants. Now, warrants are options, right, to buy additional stock in a startup at a certain price at a future date. Typically, they're executed at the next round of financing and allows investors to get shares at a discounted rate. Of course, it results in extra dilution. If you issue warrants at zero price, it will just result in extra dilution. And so that will basically just be reducing the price of the round, reducing your valuation. Now, there's nothing wrong with, I think, warrants. You can definitely issue them as a sweetener to entice certain investors that you really care about to participate in the deal. You should just be aware of that means, right? Of the dilution effect, of the fact of what they're going to be buying into in the next round, etc. But this is not such an onerous clause as the liquidation preference or the cumulative benefits or the double dipping with the participating preferred stock, etc. So these are the things that you can do in terms of retaining the company's control, is to make sure that you watch out for those things. And in terms of voting, So you obviously want to make sure that you have your voting rights, and you also want to decide which matters are voted upon, right? So not only who has what voting rights, but also which matters require a vote as well.
And so does the decision in terms at all like change if, I mean, obviously the majority of founders are looking to be, in that CEO role and take their business forward, but some founders might be more technical and looking to transition into a CTO role or other positions. Does that affect how you come up with the earlier stage terms before you find the CEO you want to bring on board?
Well, I mean, I don't think it affects I think the board structure should be the same. I think when you think about the board, what's important to mention is it should give you access to the expertise that you need to have, right? And for the early stage startup, what's required, I'm just looking for the expertise here. So the expertise required is it will be the fundraising, the internationalization. Just give me a second. And growth, that should be somebody who understands how the company should change in terms of, when it goes through a rapid growth cycle. Marketing, technology, and then it should be a specific subject matter expertise if we're talking about the product company. And so the startup board should ideally have, if we're talking about a product company, also supply chain, right? And so the startup board should really have the combination of all of those expertises or subject matter experts, so that if a CEO has a question, they have a necessary resource to get the answers that they want. And interestingly enough, who the chairman is also very important, right? Because a chairman needs to build consensus, right? Sometimes, it's good to have dissent. That's how you make good decisions, is when somebody disagrees. It forces you to challenge your assumptions, to think about certain positions again, or certain decision points, and come up with a better path forward. But you also need to make a decision at some point, right? And so a good chairman is somebody who has, for example, legal background, or somebody who's like very calm personality, who understands who the people are, can work with other people, and really create a supportive environment where people can disagree in a respectful way, but then come up with a decision that's a compromise and it meets everybody's concerns. So who the chairman is, it's very important. It does not need to be the CEO, right? It can be an investor, it can be an independent board member. It's whoever is in the best position to be that. Now, in terms of your question, CTO or CEO, I think just the composition of the board may change. So if you have a CTO, you may want a strategy person on board before you hire a CEO. And then if you're the CEO who doesn't have a technical background, then you may want to have an additional person with technical expertise to kind of help assess, give you another perspective on what your CTO is doing. But, I think the more important objective here is to be able to do your job, right? So if you're a CTO, you can do, if you're a technical person and you want to run a company, but you can't learn the business, then at some point you will be fired if you can't meet your goals. And that will actually be a fair outcome, because you're putting other people's investments and livelihoods at risk. So it's I think people need to have a fair assessment as well, in terms of it's one thing to want to run your company. It's another thing to be able to run your company successfully. And if you're taking other people's money, then you have responsibility to them to do a good job, right? And to be in a position to do a good job. And if you can't, then just bring somebody else who can.
And we had an audience question too from Tomas about what's the approximate number for a functional board, and can you just stuff the board early on with loyal co-founders and balance later with VC board members?
Right. So the board is created the second you incorporate your company. You would create your board, right? So initially it's just going to be your co-founders. Of course, you should be on the same page with your co-founders in terms of the common goals. This is not something that's a problem for the board. It will be the problem for your team if you're not on the same page. And then as you expand the board, right, you both look at the functional expertises of, whoever is the representative of the investor is, right? So you want to make sure that it's as balanced as you can, or you add on an independent member, which has access to certain expertise. And you also want to look at the personalities, right? So you want to be able to work with those people, and especially to resolve conflict in a respectful manner. Because why do founders get pushed out? Is that they have a conflict with the board, they lose trust of the board, and then the investors care. Obviously, they're afraid of losing their investment, so they're going to bring on somebody who they trust, right? So as long as you are transparent, you communicate problems to the board in a timely manner, you ask for help, right? And then you act on whatever has been decided, you can mitigate a lot of the risks that arise when you mismanage that relationship, right? When you become misaligned with your board, or similarly, when you become misaligned with your employees, right? You should, as an executive, you should manage both, right? You should make sure that you're on the same page with your employees, and that you are on the same page with your board. And that will help. And with your customers, right? So that they know what's happening. So, if everybody is aligned, then your company can move forward and resolve a lot of the, obviously issues that come up as part of business in an effective manner.
And then, yeah, so on that, obviously there's challenges in getting pushed out if you don't have a good relationship with the board. But obviously there's a lot of benefits from having that board you can turn to, to get all the advice and, expertise as you're going through your business. So I guess, what strategies do you recommend, to make the most use of the board and put the best group of people in place that can actually help you and help your company continue to move forward?
So, right. So, I've already mentioned in terms of expertise, right? Who should be on the board. I guess another expertise will be organizational restructuring, because the organization may need to go through certain changes. So somebody who understands how the organization needs to change would be good. You need to pick somebody you can trust, right? You need to pick somebody who you work well together. And when I talked about the partnership, right? So just like investors, they need to make sure that the startups fit their investment portfolio and they will make money on them, etc. Founders need to make sure that the investors, especially who end up on the board, they will be good strategic partners going forward, and they can really help the company achieve the goals. And like I've mentioned before, you need to get a strong chairman, right?
Right.
So, ideally, I don't recommend necessarily personality test, but you need to spend some time, the fundraising process takes time for a reason. By the way, it's 3 to 6 months, because people need to build relationships with each other, need to get comfortable with each other. And actually, as part of this process, you can make an assessment whether or not this is the person who you would want on your board, especially if they want to become a serious investor with. This is a person that you can have a respectful relationship with, you can that they have the expertise that you need, they can give you the advice that you need, they have the network and subject matter expertise or whatever would be useful. And think about the next 10 years, right? Because most startups take that long in order to get to a point at which either you step away or the board member will change. I will say that it's extremely difficult to change a board member. Okay, so if you don't get along with your board member, first of all, right, you need to assess why. Is it you? Is it him or her? Yeah. And try to repair that relationship. And then if the company is not doing well and you want to replace a board member, first of all, you don't know who you're going to get next, right? You don't know if this person is going to be better or worse, but also that may not even happen for you, because if your company is not doing well, you don't have any leverage with the board. They're already not happy with you because you're putting their investment at risk, right? If your company is doing well, here you may have, more leverage, but then again, you are taking the risk that this person may be even worse than the one that you have. And so it's critical that you assess very carefully who you put on the board, because this is your partner, and it's very difficult to get divorced in a way from that partner for a very long time. And removing members from the board, I think, is like, I don't even think that's possible unless something happens where they commit, a crime. Then, of course, you can replace them.
Yeah, we had another question come in, sort of relating to, the founder protections, and basically, at what stage, and this is sort of, at what stage should a CEO have a contract between themselves and the company? Like, is it something, you come up with when you incorporate, or is it something that, once you have that board of directors, they issue a contract, and like, what does that usually look like?
Well, if you are a sole co-founder, then you only have a contract with yourself. So then, I don't think it's necessary necessarily to have a contract. If there's two co-founders or more, you need to have a co-founders agreement, and I would recommend you do it as you incorporate. It's very important that you, come up with a vesting schedule, that you come up for your equity, that you come up with your roles and responsibilities, that you address what happens if one of you decides to leave the company, how does the unwind process work, and like you resolve all of these issues up front before things get difficult, before one of you becomes unhappy with another person, etc. You don't need to definitely raise any investment or have a board. A lot of founders bootstrap to exit, or to some point, like, depending on your business, you may or may not need external investment, but you do need to be on the same page with the people who you're building the company with. And problems with co-founders is one of the most common reasons why startups fail, right? It's, yes, sometimes they run out of money, sometimes they don't find the product market fit, and sometimes, very often, they just can't get along. And even though their company, right, your company is not worth anything when it's very early, right? It's worth zero. But in your mind, it's worth something because you already put your heart and soul into it. So it's all very personal, right? And then when things get personal, then business goes outside the window. And that is when having a good legal framework helps you stay calmer and make good decisions and limit risks on both sides in terms of what the next step should be should the problems arise.
Right. Yeah, and I think, that's a topic that could definitely dive in much deeper too. Like, it's always interesting on the founder relationships. There could be somebody that's like the most valuable day one through the first year of the business, and somebody whose expertise is most valuable beyond that. So how do you manage, what owner or what equity everybody should get, and the responsibilities and everything along there?
I mean, if you'd like, I can touch on that topic too a little bit. So because I get asked this question a lot, I work with some people even at the idea stage, and I help them get to the point where they go to an accelerator, for example, such as Jason runs, where they can develop the idea further. And so, of course, they ask, what percentage should I give to co-founders? And it's not as straightforward, okay? It's not straightforward, but, here's a way to think about it, okay? An advisor to the company will get anywhere from 0.5 to 2% equity for the commitment of, I think, 2 hours a month, okay, up to, right? And so so you can make a calculation that they usually, this 2% will get vested over 2 years, so that's 48 months, right? And then if they work about 2 hours a month, you can calculate what the hourly equity rate is. Right. And we're not talking right now about one founder funding the venture, one founder not funding the venture. We're just purely looking at, I'm the main founder, right? I want to bring somebody on board. I want to see how much equity do I give them. You can just look at that kind of rate and extrapolate it based on the commitment of that person. And then, offer them 5%, 10%, depending on how much they actually, what is their value to the company. Of course, there are other factors, right? If the person is very experienced and it's very valuable for you to have them on board, then their rate, you can increase that rate and give them a little bit more equity. But the important thing is that that it needs to be vested, right? Nobody will get equity right away, and you earn equity as your salary in the beginning, and it may accelerate if you get funding or somebody starts getting paid or whatever, right? And those things you will discuss actually as you're creating a co-founders agreement, is like how this will work. And this is very important in terms of incentives. If the founder, so I get this question is like, what happens if somebody starts working more? So that's great, at which point you may renegotiate and amend the agreement. But it's a good idea not to overcomplicate things in the beginning, but just make them very clear, and make it very clear what the responsibilities are, what the deadlines are, and what the deliverables are. Okay, and as you work with the person and you see that they're doing their job, then you can talk about something like a bigger commitment or whatever, or the unwind, and it will be very clear what the unwind conditions are. Another thing that I recommend, if you didn't start the company together, but you found the co-founder, right, through whatever, co-founders lab or meetups or whatever, networking events or your network, that you have a cliff period. Cliff period is when you it's a test period. It's usually 3 months. You just work together, and then the equity will vest after 3 months for 3 months. But if you let go that person within that test period, they don't get anything, right? So this is a risk that they're going to take. But for you, this is very important as a founder, because you don't want to start giving away your equity to some random people and crowd your term sheet. Crowd your cap table. Another thing is, I actually don't recommend on that topic, is that do not give your equity to every random service provider. Like you need like legal advice or accounting advice, or like a website design, a logo, like you should have a graphic designer on your cap table because they did like 2 hours of work for you. So you should definitely, when you start a business, have a figure in your mind in terms of the expenses that you will cover, and then of course anybody who's involved with the company long term should get an equity and be a partner for you to build your company going forward.
That's great advice. And then, yeah, I mean, on, or say you've taken, I guess either side, yeah, I mean, you're further along in the business, whether or not you've structured everything correctly in all these agreements and relationships so far. And then you're at a point where your position as a founder is more in jeopardy, either like from the board or from other co-founders. Is there, I guess, what strategies can you take when you're in that sort of defending your position as a founder, later on in the venture?
So your question is, if you have a conflict with the board later on?
The board, is it mostly through protections you've developed earlier on, or is there some strategies, for defending your position later on in the company if you didn't structure?
If you don't put the right terms in the beginning when people sign term sheets, I think it's very hard to institute new terms that will limit people's power later on, and especially it will become disadvantageous to you if you have a conflict. So yes, I mean, creating good corporate governance from the very beginning, as when you create a board, as you begin, especially adding outside board members, is very important. But I can talk about what are the key strategies in managing a board as for earlier stage startups, and we can talk about how that may change as the company becomes more mature. So for the Series H stage, most meetings tend to be informal, and they may range anywhere from bi-weekly to bi-monthly, right? So the most important thing is, why do you have a conflict in the board, right? The expectations, right? Or in any relationship, the expectations do not match. So it is your job, right, as an executive, to manage the expectations, and this means delivering on milestones, right? You need to, I think one of the main reasons why founders have a conflict with the board is that they lack transparency. They don't communicate with them enough. And then especially as they have problems, they are afraid to communicate that they're not hitting their milestones, which may exacerbate the problem and get you to the point where it's not easy to fix it and you need extra money, and then you come to them and this is the first time that they've heard about it. Okay, so the expectations are not managed. Why? Because they think everything is fine. in fact, everything is not fine, right? So you're like a completely different, and then they become disappointed, and then they lose trust in you, and then the cycle starts where if you don't come to a path forward where you correct your performance, the company's performance, and able to succeed, right, then you may lose control of the company. So it starts with mismanaging expectations. And so you need to be aligned on goals, right? How do you get aligned on goals? You set your milestones together, right? And this is done in an effective board meeting. So you should not treat a board meeting as a status update, right? You want to send them an update, send them an email. A board meeting, this is a forum for you to discuss tough issues, things that you need help on. That's why the composition of the board, right, we were spoken about earlier, is so important, so that you can get the necessary feedback on different issues and you're able to make a good decision. So you need to choose every time 1 or 2 strategic topics that you want to dive in, right? So you don't want to discuss everything. And you also need to focus on, what is it that you're trying to achieve, right? So you need to be very clear on your key performance indicators or KPIs, right? Because then when you set the milestones, you can be very specific in terms of what success means, right? And then you can also figure out, if you're not getting to this number, why that happened. You need to build personal relationship with each board member. Okay, why? Because you need to know how to work with them, how to influence them, right? How to get your point across in the most efficient way. Also, when you have a personal relationship with somebody, if you disagree, they're more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? Instead of just losing trust in you, they'll be more open to hear your point of view, and vice versa. If you have trust in them, you'll be more open to hear their point of view, right? So like the board is not your enemy, right? They want you to succeed, right? They put money in you because they believe in you. So they're your allies. But if you treat them as, a necessary evil, so to speak, right? That they want to take power away from you, they don't care, they just care about making their limited partners happy, etc., then that's what it's going to be. Right? If you treat them as partners, then you can have a much more productive relationship and succeed. Of course, they want to make their limited partners happy because they're the ones who gave them the money, which they gave to you, right? So the limited partners are your friends too, because otherwise you wouldn't even be able to take your company forward. So you need to think about what's important for them as well in order to have effective conversations. And what else? Okay, and then removing board members who already covered. Yeah, I mean, so just to, I guess, recap, communication transparency, so regular meetings, clear goals, clear strategy to achieve them, clear metrics to measure success, and if there are problems, a mitigation plan in place that everybody agrees on in terms of what to be done next.
I think that's really great advice. And and I think, it's something, like you mentioned, the earlier on you figure all of this out and implement everything effectively, the better you'll be down the road if anything does come about. And it's great if you can have that relationship with your board and use them to your advantage rather than having thinking of them as adversaries and that necessary evil as you just described.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, there is obviously a very famous company, KKR, and they sometimes just push the founders out. Yeah. Okay, you can't, so it's, I'm talking about the situation where you can control things, because obviously all of us, we can only be responsible for the things we can control. Sometimes the situation is not in your control. Somebody will just do something dishonorable and you may lose your company as a result. And, I don't have an advice for that, except to, every one door closes, another opens. So if this company didn't work out, you have learned your lessons and you will not take KKR as your partner next time or something like that. Do more due diligence on investors. And actually that goes back to due diligence, right? So to avoid putting yourself in a situation where you may get pushed out by an investor in a, hostile takeover, like, whatever, like a situation that you can't control, do research, look at, what they did with other portfolio companies. If this is their common practice, then this is, if you decide to take money from them, this is the risk that you take. I mean, of course, it's not guaranteed that it's going to happen, but this is something you should be aware of. So due diligence on investors is key to protect yourself and good governance.
Yeah, and a lot of investors too are going to be, posting at least or showcasing somewhere their portfolio, so you can look up and dive into, those companies and how the relationships worked in the past.
Yeah, talk to founders, if you're able. Yeah.
Just
like they do, all the investors, they do diligence on you. And so it should be, this is a two-way street.
Right.
Yep.
And then, yeah, wanted to loop in an audience question from Anastasia about, in the case of a down round, are there any financing strategies to mitigate the potentially negative impacts of dilution and other aspects from that down round?
So for the down round, as an investor, there is a protection that they could ask to put in. It's called an anti-dilution protection. The biotech companies have that a lot. There are two forms of anti-dilution protection. One of them is called the full ratchet. This is a protection where the price of the round is irrelevant, and what they only look at is the amount that people invest to determine what the equity stake is. It's the most onerous anti-dilution protection because it misaligns the risk that every party takes based on when they come in. So it's very good for early investors, and it's horrible for later stage investors who don't get compensated for the risk that they take when they invest in the down round, and obviously risking that the company will fail. And then there is a middle of the road protection, which is a weighted average anti-dilution. As a founder, I mean, look, if you're in a down round, you're going to pay for it. I mean, you didn't do your job. So I think that, there's nothing you can do. I think that you should try not to offer anti-dilution protections to investors if you can, because it makes it less attractive for future investors to come on board. However, if you have to offer an anti-dilution protection, then offer the middle of the road, which is the weighted average anti-dilution. It's the kind of a compromise between the full anti-dilution, which is full ratchet, and complete dilution, which is the usual way. And as a founder, look, do your job. And if you don't do your job, there is a penalty. You lose a little bit of your company.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, and so, I think you've had, great advice for everybody, no matter what stage, if you're, we have a audience that's, some early stage founders, some later stage, and other people in the industry as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been great advice overall. And I know you mentioned at the beginning you have some other courses and programs people can check out. Like, what's the best way to access some of the resources you and Startup Station offer?
Sure. So I want to give you guys a sign-up sheet to our mailing list in chat. And we do actually have an event with Astro Global. We do events also twice a month. The next event we have coming up on January 27th. Let me see if I have the, I'm going to get a link. The event is this. It's actually on valuation. So valuation and negotiation tool, a financial factor, a wild guess. So we're going to discuss this topic exactly that we kind of covered here, but in more detail. And we also have a conversation with the founder who was in our investor matching program in October. They raised $20 million, 4 rounds of financing. So we're going to talk about how, very practically, how did he negotiate the valuation for each round with the investors. And let me get the event right. So if you sign up to our mailing list, you'll get information about the events and the programs and everything that we're doing. And let me get the event right now. Sorry, I thought I did it, but I think I might have closed the window. Okay. So all our events are at 11 a.m. Eastern time so that we can cover the maximum amount of time zones because we work with startups globally. And then if you'd like to learn more about the classes, the Startup Station offers a free masterclass, how to build credible financials for your venture. You can sign up on this homepage. And I would start it this way. And then from there, if you'd like to buy the flagship finance series, which covers the basics of accounting, financial modeling, valuation, startup finance, you can do so. But this masterclass introduces you to the framework that I've developed to value in early stage ventures, which means that you don't have any financial history or have very little financial history. It helps you to think about how to model your go-to-market strategy, how to set price for your product, and then talks about some of the common financial modeling mistakes that founders make and how to correct them. And this is what I see, in my practice and working with startups. If you'd like to check other courses, I'm going to give you a link for that as well. And then on our course page, we also have different templates specific to the business model. So if you know how to do financial modeling already, you just want to see what a full financial model looks like, you can just download the template best matches your business case. And finally, I can give you information about our 2 programs. One is the investor matching, and that's going to run at the end of February. Here you get exposed to 200 investors in your industry and stage. And then based on investors' interest, you then may go through a prep program to prepare for meetings. And then the public funding program in Europe. This is for healthcare startups only for the future because we're just closed admission for that. And that's it. Oh, and then there are resources. There are free resources on the site. You can just go through the site. There's a lot of info, and so free resources will tell you what they are. There's different webinars and YouTube channel and blog on different topics.
Sounds great. Yeah, definitely check out all those resources, and yeah, and we can share some in our newsletter as a follow-up as well. And just coming up to again, we'll send out a follow-up email from the event here with a recap, the video if you want to come back and check it out. And then also, check out our we have 2 upcoming fireside chats just for our chapter, including Will Grayland, the founder of OVLoop, which is a fintech payments platform, and Carlos Ventura from Feast and Fettle, which is a gourmet food venture. And yeah, definitely check out both of those, as well as the global conference the end of February. And yeah, there'll be a lot of great speakers on there. Normally it's a in-person event in California with about 5,000 people, including entrepreneurs, investors, and the broader startup industry. This year, might be even bigger virtual. So definitely, grab your ticket for that and come check it out. But yeah, really appreciated, all the great advice you gave, Victoria, and excited to share this, the recording with all of the rest of our community.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, guys. I just want to say we do have a promotion code, Startup Station 50, for all of you guys for the upcoming event. So you want to use it, you can get, this is a paid event, but you get 50% off any ticket option you choose.
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks again. And yeah, thanks everyone for jumping on today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Please feel free to contact me with any more questions, and come to our events. And I'll hope that at some point I'll make it to Startup Grind too.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Oh.